Hi, my name is Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to update you with the latest police guidance in the face of quite a lot of confusion and a little bit of upset amongst some members of the population. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, after the emergency regulations came online, there were a small but largely reported number of cases of people being upset by police action against them. Now, this came in many forms, from stopping people buying Easter eggs to going for a leisurely drive, that sort of thing. Some were potentially reasonable measures. I discussed in the previous video how going for a drive without a great purpose isn't ideal, but some of them were just silly, like the buying of Easter eggs. And I think the issue is as well, like, there'll be some members of the population who will understand what's required of them, and they're not buying it because they're still thinking, oh, this is just a bit of flu. Despite the fact that the whole world is taking such precautions and the death toll's going up so high that it's a baffling thing to think. But there are some people who think we're all taking it a bit too far and they're not going to have anything to do with it. But at the same, that is someone deliberately refusing to follow those guidelines. Sodom. But then there are other people who may be falling foul of regulations without really knowing. How many people, after all, would go onto the government website, download these regulations and read them themselves? And even then, sometimes they can be a bit vague. So, you feel hard done by if you're getting clobbered for something that you thought was fine. And sometimes you have been clobbered for something that actually is fine. So that's where there's been a lot of upset. And as police leaders were saying before these regulations came online, and have been saying recently as well, at the end of the day, police by consent in this country. It's the only way it can actually work. So, some of the blame has been placed on government ministers by police leaders for saying certain things publicly that are not the case. So police were taking a bit of a lead on that. For example, when a minister was saying you should only go to the supermarket once a week. That's not the case. That's not what the regulations say. The government have actually come out and said, no, that's not what we're saying. So new guidance has been issued for the police, which covers a number of areas. But one thing, for example, that some police were doing, not on an individual basis, but some forces, were using, for example, roadblocks and drones to prevent people driving to remote areas and then carrying out their exercise there. That'll no longer happen. People can do that. Now, whether some people think that's a good idea or not is another issue, and there are arguments for and against. What matters in terms of police action is not whether or not it's a good idea, it's whether or not it's legal. And it is perfectly legal for people to do that. There is a general emphasis on individuals taking reasonable action to minimise the spread of the virus. So what the police should be doing is judging an action. Are you attempting to minimise the spread of the virus? Yes or no? And if you are, then you need to be... In fact, the use of the word reasonable is in there. The use of the word common sense or term common sense is in there. It was pointed out by a few legal experts that the new legislation is regarding public health. It was put forward by the Health Secretary. It's not public order legislation put forward by the Home Secretary. So, for example, when Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, tweeted that when these came online, she said, I have just given the police new emergency powers, she was mistaken, or lying, whichever. It was Matt Hancock who's given the police this authority. It was nothing to do with the Home Secretary. And that is a key distinction. Police are only to use these powers to enforce public health measures and have to be sensitive to flexibilities. Now, I'll give you a scenario, my situation. So, the ideal scenario for me, because I need to work here. I'm doing this, and everything needs to be done here. I have a studio, a small studio, with which I do that. Now, I have a girlfriend, and what had previously been happening is I would visit at the weekend. She would come over on here Wednesdays, and that's what we did, to see each other. Obviously, that can't happen exactly as it is, but there is nothing wrong with me working here in the week, going to hers at the weekend, because that is a household that is locked down. There's no one else living here. So if it were possible for me to transfer the studio over there, I would do, but it makes no difference because there's no extra people I'm coming into contact with. And there's no extra people they are coming into contact with that situation. Now, we have actually looked, because I've actually said to her, and I've thought to myself, do you know what? I think they're going to take a more black and white view of these regulations. And if I were to say to them, well, look, this is now where I've designated my place of work, and I'll be living there, but effectively I'm only living there at the weekend, then they may go, no, you can't do that. So we have been looking at if it's possible to clear a space to put the studio in, but it takes a bit of room. However, with these latest guidelines, that would suggest to me that actually no, that won't be necessary, because look at the alternatives. So what the proposal would be is I work here Monday to Friday, go there at the weekend, and then come back, and that's fine. If I were to say, well, no, I'm going to be living there but working here, so I have to return there each night, then what would happen is I would be making 6 round trips a week instead of 1. That increases the potential for a traffic incident, particularly as it would be late at night when it's dark. Now, the chance would be very low, of course. I've managed to go around for years and years without crashing into anyone, but nonetheless, the risk has increased 6-fold. Obviously, if I'm involved in an incident that is potentially going to hospital, that's putting extra pressure on the NHS, not ideal. Then there'd be the fact I'd have to fill up with fuel 6 times as often, doing 6 times as many trips, 6 times as much fuel required. So that is increasing the risk of infection. If I am infected, I risk passing that on to someone else when I go and get petrol, or if someone else has it that's getting petrol at the same time or dealing with it, they risk passing it on to me. That risk has increased. So my proposal is simply reducing the risk of infection. If there was someone else in this household, then it would be a definite no-no, but there isn't. So that's straightforward. And what that should suggest now in the guidance is actually that'll be fine, do what I was planning to do anyway, because in actual fact, any other action would increase the risk of infection. My action is reducing it, even though you have to look at it a bit flexibly. So that is the take home from this guidance. We're trying to prevent the spread of the virus. If an action increases the risk of that infection spreading and you can avoid carrying out the action, then avoid carrying it out. Obviously, some people can't. If you're working as a nurse, where you still have to go to hospital where there's bound to be the virus around, that's what you have to do. But if you don't have to, then you don't do it. And the police should involve themselves only when someone's carrying out an act that has an unacceptable risk of spreading the virus. The non-essential actions can't include, because the regulations are clear about this, shopping. So again, this thing about, oh, you can only go once a week. No, the regulations don't say that. I would suggest that it's good practice to reduce it. I have certainly reduced it to once or even once a fortnight. I'm doing it as little as possible, in fact. Whereas I used to just do my shopping once a week on a particular day, now I've got mine for this week, and my attitude will be actually when it's time to do it next week, I won't actually go. I'll look around, I'll go, well, do I need to? And if I don't need to, then I won't. I'll delay it. So in actual fact, I may end up actually only going grocery shopping once every 2 weeks. But shopping, they can't say to you, no, that's not essential, or you're doing it too many times. No. Exercise, as long as it's only once a day. And if you're a cross-country runner and you need to run up and down a hill and you don't live near a hill, you can drive to it. That's okay. Obviously, you need to maintain social distancing while you're there. That includes in the car park. Don't park right next to someone who's about to get out of their car as well. Unless it's on the opposite side, I suppose. Travelling to work that can't be carried out where you're living is fine. Travelling to where you're living is fine. There are a few other exceptions as well, but these are the ones that would apply to most people. So, yeah, it looks like the guidance is going to be a bit more common sense. I mean, there's obviously the scope for these regulations to be tightened if it turns out it wasn't really working effectively. At the moment, the government are not suggesting that it's not working, in fact, quite the reverse, although I talked about that yesterday. So we'll just see what it is. They said initially for 3 weeks, and then it won't stop after 3 weeks, of course, but then they'll be able to decide whether they need to tighten it or not, or just keep them in place for a bit longer as well. So hopefully that explains a few things. Obviously, it is better to always go onto the government website for the latest advice as well. I'll put a link in the description below. But I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details as well. And until next time, I'll see you later.